Four recruits surrounded her in the mess hall. 45 seconds later, they learned she was a Navy SEAL. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The mess hall was bustling as the morning routine unfolded. The sound of trays clattering, soldiers chatting, and the faint smell of scrambled eggs and bacon filled the air. It was another normal day, another normal morning in the cafeteria. But in the corner, unnoticed by most, sat Lena, a newcomer to the unit. She wasn't one to make a scene. She chose a quiet corner and settled into her meal, her eyes scanning the room, as soldiers came and went, oblivious to the woman they hadn't quite figured out yet. Lena wasn't big. She wasn't loud. In fact, if you didn't look closely, you might have missed her completely. But that would be a mistake. As the other soldiers talked and laughed, Lena kept to herself. Her focus wasn't on idle chatter. She had more pressing matters. Unknown to the recruits around her, Lena wasn't just any soldier. She wasn't the type to boast, to make a big entrance. She was the kind of person who let her actions speak louder than any words ever could. At the next table, a group of 4 recruits sat, and their eyes quickly turned toward Lena. They had heard rumors, of course, but rumors were easy to dismiss when you were busy with your own life. They hadn't seen what she was capable of, yet. Jake, the tallest of the 4, smirked as he took a bite of his toast. "Look at her," he muttered. "What's a woman like that doing here? This isn't a place for people like her." The others laughed, but the sound was empty, just a typical joke made by young soldiers still trying to prove themselves in a world they thought they understood. Lena ignored them. She kept her eyes on her plate, her hands steady as she picked at her food. The whispers continued, and slowly, the jokes grew louder, more deliberate. It wasn't long before one of them, Tommy, leaned in and said in a voice that everyone at the table could hear, "Hey, you should consider transferring out. I hear the kitchen could use a hand. At least there you won't be in the way." The other recruits chuckled, and their laughter spread across the room like a wave. But Lena remained calm, unfazed. She wasn't interested in responding. She didn't need to. Her silence was enough. But as Tommy's voice grew louder, she finally looked up, meeting his gaze. "You should walk away," Lena said softly, her voice even, but the weight of her words lingered in the air. Her tone was calm, but there was something about it, something that caught Tommy off guard. For a brief second, he hesitated. But the moment passed, and the group continued their teasing, unaware of how close they were to making a huge mistake. Tommy leaned in, his smirk widening. "What's your problem? You think you're tough?" he asked. "You're too small to handle what's coming." Lena's response came in a flash. She stood up, pushing her tray aside. The air in the mess hall seemed to go still, as though time itself paused for a moment. Her movements were slow, deliberate, and yet in an instant, she was face to face with Tommy. He reached out to grab her arm, but before he knew what happened, his grip was redirected, and he found himself thrown off balance. Within seconds, Lena had spun him around, using his own momentum against him, and sent him stumbling back into the chairs. The mess hall fell silent. The recruits, who had been laughing just moments ago, were now staring in disbelief as Tommy scrambled to regain his footing. Lena didn't break a sweat. Her eyes locked with the others as she calmly wiped her hands on her pants. The 4 recruits were stunned. They couldn't process what had just happened. The man who had been mocking her, the one who thought she was just another easy target, was now disoriented and humiliated in front of everyone. The silence was broken by the sound of footsteps as another soldier, a veteran, approached. "You might want to take a step back," the veteran said, a knowing look on his face. She's not just some recruit. You'll learn that the hard way. And just like that, the lesson was learned. The recruits who had once laughed, who had underestimated Lena, now found themselves on the receiving end of a truth they weren't ready for: this woman was not to be messed with. She had earned her place, and anyone who doubted her would quickly regret it. The mess hall returned to its usual hum, but for the 4 recruits, things would never be the same. They had learned respect, but not in the way they had expected. As the tension in the mess hall began to fade, Lena returned to her table, unbothered by the stunned stares of the recruits around her. They were still trying to process what had just happened, their faces pale with disbelief. The room, once filled with laughter and mockery, now felt eerily quiet. Lena calmly sat down and picked up her tray again, continuing her meal as though nothing had changed. The moment she had turned her back to them, Jake and the others realized they had underestimated her in every way possible. They had thought she was just another rookie, someone who didn't belong in their world, someone they could easily push around. They were wrong. The quiet confidence she carried was a stark contrast to their brashness, and it left them wondering just who she really was. It didn't take long for their whispers to spread, and soon enough, they had attracted the attention of other soldiers. "Did you see that?" One soldier muttered, trailing off as he saw Lena still calmly eating, completely unaffected by the scene she had just caused. The others at her table kept their distance, not wanting to provoke her further. In the far corner of the mess hall, Sergeant Anderson watched the whole exchange with interest. He had been quietly observing Lena from the moment she walked in, sensing there was more to her than met the eye. He knew the type. There were always those who quietly slipped under the radar, only to reveal their true potential when least expected. He had seen it before. The question was, did she have the discipline to back up that strength? The kind of strength that could turn the tide in combat, not just in the mess hall. As the noise around her picked up again, Lena finished her meal without a word. She was used to the whispers. It came with the territory, being the only woman in a unit full of tough men. But she didn't care about their opinions. What mattered was the mission, the camaraderie, and the trust her team would one day place in her when it counted the most. Just as Lena finished her meal and got up to leave, Sergeant Anderson approached her. He was a man of few words, but his reputation was known across the base. He had led missions that many others couldn't handle, and his presence demanded respect. "You're a tough one, Lena," he said, his tone low but sincere. "I saw what happened back there." Lena didn't flinch, her expression unreadable. She met his eyes, saying nothing, waiting for him to continue. "I've seen soldiers crack under pressure," Anderson continued, "but you didn't even flinch. That's rare." Lena's gaze softened, but she didn't speak. Anderson paused, as if weighing his next words carefully. "Listen, I'm not here to judge you. But if you want to make it in this unit, you'll need more than just physical strength. You'll need to prove you've got the mental fortitude to survive the worst of it. You've got what it takes to be a SEAL, but there's a lot more to it than just a fight in the mess hall." Lena nodded slowly. "I know." Anderson smiled slightly. "Good. Because you're about to get your first real test." He gave her a moment before adding, "Get some rest. You'll be called up soon." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Lena standing there, her mind already racing through the possibilities. She had expected it. A real test. Something to push her even further. But she was ready. She had been ready for a long time. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Lena spent the evening preparing her gear, checking and rechecking everything as she always did. She didn't sleep much that night. The anticipation of what was to come kept her up, focused, and alert. The next morning, she was already awake before the sun had risen, ready to face whatever challenge was waiting for her. The base was quiet, most of the soldiers still recovering from the previous day's activities. But not Lena. She was ready for the challenge, no matter what it entailed. When the call finally came, it was exactly what she had expected, a high-value target had been located deep in enemy territory, and her team was being deployed to eliminate it. The mission was dangerous, but that was why they were there. They were the best. As she suited up and made her way to the briefing room, Lena couldn't help but think back to the mess hall incident. It had been a small thing, but in that moment, it had been a reminder of the reality she lived in. The world she had chosen wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't kind. But it was hers. And she would earn her place in it, one mission at a time. As Lena prepared for the mission, her mind was sharp, focused, every detail running through her head like clockwork. The early morning air was crisp as she tightened the straps of her tactical gear, each movement methodical, precise. She had done this countless times before, but this time felt different. The whispers from the mess hall still lingered in her mind, but they no longer bothered her. What mattered now was the task at hand, the mission, the chance to prove herself further to the team, to those who still doubted her. The briefing had been clear: a high-value target was located in a heavily fortified area, deep in enemy territory. The mission was simple: infiltrate, eliminate, and get out. But as with every mission, the risks were high, and failure was not an option. Her team, a group of seasoned operators, would be relying on each other, and it was up to them to work seamlessly as one unit. She checked her gear again, ensuring everything was in place: ammunition, explosives, communications, all perfect. The rest of the team had gathered in the operations room, already assembling their equipment and finalizing their strategies. Sergeant Anderson, their commanding officer, stood at the front, briefing everyone on the details one last time. "Listen up, everyone," he said, his voice commanding, steady. "This is a high-priority mission. We're going in and out quickly. Stay sharp. Lena, you're with us." The team members glanced at each other but didn't say anything. They had seen her handle herself before, but this was the real test. There was no room for mistakes. The mission would begin in an hour, but Lena felt a calmness that she hadn't expected. Her pulse was steady, her breathing even. This was what she was made for. When the time came, they boarded the helicopter, the air thick with anticipation. The hum of the rotor blades drowned out everything else as they soared over the rugged terrain. The landscape below was a blur of green and brown, the mountains rising sharply in the distance, like sentinels guarding the enemy's stronghold. It felt surreal to be here, in the thick of it, but Lena had always known she would be. She had trained for moments like this, moments when the stakes were high, when her skills would be tested in ways most couldn't imagine. The helicopter touched down quietly on a nearby ridge, far enough from the target site to avoid detection but close enough to move quickly. The team disembarked, each of them moving with precision, blending into the shadows like ghosts. Lena moved alongside them, her presence unnoticed, just another part of the operation. They moved swiftly through the dense forest, their steps calculated, every sound muffled by the thick canopy above. It felt like they had been walking for hours, but in reality, it had only been minutes. The target was getting closer. As they neared the compound, Lena's focus intensified. Every step, every movement, felt deliberate. She knew this was the moment where everything would change. The team paused for a moment, using the cover of a large boulder to assess the situation ahead. They could see the target building now, a concrete structure surrounded by armed guards. The entrance was heavily guarded, but there was a weak point, a small alleyway at the side of the building. It was narrow, dark, and perfect for a stealth entry. "Lena," Anderson said, his voice barely a whisper, "you take point. We'll follow." Lena nodded, her heart beating faster now, but her mind clear. She had trained for this. She knew what had to be done. With a deep breath, she moved forward, sliding into the alley with the stealth and grace of a shadow. She could hear the faint sound of the guards talking ahead, their voices low and unguarded. They were close. She could see their outlines through the narrow space between the buildings. She waited for the perfect moment, timing everything down to the second. As one of the guards turned his back, Lena moved, her movements swift and silent. She took him down with a quiet efficiency, using just the right amount of force to render him unconscious without alerting the others. She dragged his body into the shadows, then signaled to the rest of the team. They followed quickly, each of them moving through the alleyway with the same silent precision. They had reached the entrance, but there were more guards inside. It was now or never. "On my mark," Anderson whispered. "Ready?" The team nodded. Lena checked her weapon one last time, then readied herself for the breach. As the countdown began, the adrenaline surged through her veins, but she remained calm. She had been here before, and she knew exactly what needed to be done. The door burst open, and the team swept in, moving fast and hard. Lena's gun flashed in the dim light as she neutralized one guard after another, her movements fluid and precise. The team worked like a well-oiled machine, each member in sync with the others. They had a job to do, and they were doing it flawlessly. As they reached the target, Lena felt a surge of satisfaction. The high-value target was in front of them, just as expected. Anderson signaled her forward, and Lena stepped in, her eyes locking onto the target with deadly intent. The mission was a success, but Lena knew this was just the beginning. She had proven herself, but the road ahead was still long. As they made their way back to the extraction point, Lena felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. This was what she had trained for. This was what she was born to do. As the helicopter lifted off from the extraction point, Lena leaned back in her seat, her eyes scanning the horizon. The mission had been a success, but there was no time to celebrate. The adrenaline was still coursing through her veins, but she knew better than to let it cloud her mind. This was just one step in a long journey, and she couldn't afford to get complacent. The team remained silent as the helicopter sped toward the base, each member lost in their own thoughts. Sergeant Anderson sat across from Lena, his eyes flicking briefly toward her. He had been watching her since the mission began, observing how she moved, how she reacted under pressure. He had been impressed, but that wasn't enough. Not yet. Anderson wasn't the type to hand out praise easily. If you wanted his respect, you had to earn it, and that meant proving you could handle the hardest missions, the ones that tested your limits. As the helicopter made its descent back to base, Lena's thoughts drifted to the mission they had just completed. It had been dangerous, yes, but it had also been necessary. The high-value target they had eliminated was a key player in a larger operation, one that threatened national security. Taking him out was just one part of a much bigger picture. But the mission was over now, and Lena couldn't help but think about the look in the recruits' eyes back in the mess hall. She had proven herself in their eyes, but there was still one question that lingered in the back of her mind: would they truly accept her as one of their own, or was this just a temporary victory? The helicopter touched down on the tarmac with a soft thud, and the team quickly disembarked. They moved efficiently, each member knowing exactly what to do. Lena's thoughts remained focused as they entered the briefing room, where they were met with the team's commanding officers. Anderson stepped forward, briefing the higher-ups on the mission's success and the intelligence they had gathered. He gave the team a brief nod of approval, but nothing more. They had done their job, and that was all that mattered. But as the team filed out of the room, Lena could feel the weight of their eyes on her. She wasn't sure what they thought of her, whether they respected her, or if they still saw her as an outsider. She had proven herself in the field, but respect was something that had to be earned over time. As she walked back to the barracks, Lena reflected on her journey. She had been through more than most soldiers in her unit, facing challenges that many never would. But she had always pushed through, always found a way to rise above the obstacles in her path. That was who she was. And nothing, not even the doubts of her fellow soldiers, would change that. The next morning, Lena was called to the training field for a routine check. It wasn't unusual for soldiers to be called in for these types of checks, but Lena knew that Sergeant Anderson wouldn't be calling her in unless he had a specific purpose in mind. As she arrived, she saw him standing by the obstacle course, his arms crossed, waiting. He didn't greet her with a smile or a word, just a silent acknowledgement. Lena stood at attention, waiting for his command. Anderson finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "You did well on the mission, Lena," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "But I need to see more. You've proven you can fight, but can you lead?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Lena knew this was the moment. The moment she could either prove she had what it took to rise through the ranks, or fail to meet the expectations set before her. She wasn't afraid. She had faced tougher challenges in her life. "Yes, sir," Lena replied, her voice steady. Anderson gave a brief nod, then turned toward the obstacle course. "Let's see if you can lead your team through this. I want to see how you handle pressure when the stakes are higher." The course was designed to push even the most seasoned soldiers to their limits, and Lena knew this was her chance to prove she could do more than just follow orders. She took a deep breath, ready to give it everything she had. As the rest of the team assembled, Lena took charge, directing them with calm authority. Every command was precise, every move coordinated. The course was brutal, but Lena kept her focus. She wasn't just running it for herself, she was running it for her team. And she wasn't about to let them down. The team struggled at times, but Lena never wavered. She was always there, offering encouragement, providing direction, ensuring that every soldier made it through the course safely. When the final obstacle came into view, Lena could see the exhaustion in their eyes. But she didn't stop. She pushed them, urging them to finish strong. With one final burst of energy, they crossed the finish line, and the team collapsed in exhaustion. But there was no time to rest. Anderson was already walking toward them, his expression unreadable. "You did well," he said, his tone more approving than before. "But this is just the beginning. You've got a long way to go." Lena nodded, understanding the weight of his words. This wasn't the end. It was only the start of a much greater journey. She had proven she could lead, but now she had to prove she could stay the course. And she would. She wasn't done yet. The days following the obstacle course passed in a blur, but Lena felt different. The mission, the training, and the test of leadership had all pushed her in ways she hadn't anticipated. There was something about the weight of Anderson's words that stuck with her. "You've proven you can fight, but can you lead?" She had answered that question, but deep down, she knew that leadership wasn't just about giving orders or knowing how to fight in combat. It was about knowing when to push, when to hold back, and how to bring out the best in those who followed you. The next mission was just around the corner, and this time, the stakes were higher. Her unit was being deployed to a region known for its difficult terrain and unpredictable enemy forces. Intelligence had confirmed the presence of a high-ranking target, someone whose capture would make a significant impact on the operation. The mission was deemed high risk, and Lena knew this time, she would be taking charge in more than just name. As the team gathered for their briefing, the weight of the responsibility was not lost on her. Anderson had made it clear that this mission was a test. "Lena," he said, his eyes meeting hers across the room, "you'll be leading the team through this one. You've earned it, but don't mistake that for a free pass. This mission will be a grind." Lena nodded, her mind already assessing the situation. The environment was harsh, and the enemy was known to be ruthless. But she wasn't afraid. She had been through worse, and she knew her team. They had all earned each other's trust over time, and now, it was her job to guide them through the toughest challenge yet. The mission would begin at dusk. They had to make their way through dense forest, navigate rocky hills, and remain undetected by enemy patrols. The path ahead wasn't clear, but Lena's mind was already working through the logistics. She had the experience, and now, she had the confidence to lead her team with a calm, steady hand. As the team set out under the cover of darkness, Lena kept a steady pace, her movements deliberate, making sure they stayed on course. She called the shots, guiding them through the forest with precision. Every few minutes, she would pause, scanning the area for any signs of enemy movement, listening to the distant sounds of the night. The air was thick with tension, but Lena remained calm, never rushing, never faltering. "Keep close," she whispered to her team, her voice low but steady. "We don't move unless I say so." The team fell into line behind her, trusting her every command. Hours passed, and the forest became even denser, but Lena didn't let her guard down. She knew that the further they went, the more dangerous the situation would become. When they reached a narrow pass between two cliffs, Lena held up her hand, signaling for the team to stop. She crouched down, pulling out a map from her pack and studying it under the dim light of a small flashlight. They were close to the target's location now. She could feel the weight of what was coming next. The decision was in her hands, and she had to make it fast. "We move in 30 minutes, she said, looking up at her team. "Stay sharp, stay quiet." The team nodded, knowing that this was the point of no return. As they prepared to move again, Lena's mind flashed back to the training, to the moments when she had to prove herself, not just to the others, but to herself. Leadership had always been more than just tactics and decisions. It was about knowing when to trust your instincts, when to trust the people around you. And now, as she led her team closer to the target, she realized that this was the moment she had been waiting for. The next few minutes felt like hours, but Lena kept her focus. They reached the target's compound undetected, moving with the stealth of shadows. The plan was simple: infiltrate, secure the target, and extract. But in the world of special operations, simplicity didn't always guarantee success. Lena knew that anything could go wrong in an instant. As they moved into position, the team halted, waiting for her signal. She signaled for two of her team members to take the perimeter while the others followed her toward the target. Each step was calculated, every movement synchronized. The enemy guards were close, but Lena knew they wouldn't spot them. They were too quiet, too careful. She led them forward, her heart beating steadily in her chest, knowing that this was the moment that would define her leadership. When they reached the target's room, Lena gestured for the team to take their positions. Her heart raced as the door was breached. The moment the target was in sight, Lena moved with the precision she had been trained for. Her team reacted instantly, securing the area and neutralizing the guards. The target was captured without a shot being fired. Lena's command over the situation was evident as she issued the order for extraction. As they made their way back to the extraction point, Lena felt a quiet satisfaction. She had led her team to success. She had earned their respect, but more importantly, she had proven to herself that she had the leadership it took to command when the stakes were the highest. The team's success on the mission had brought a quiet sense of accomplishment to the base, but for Lena, there was no time to rest. As the days passed, she found herself reflecting more and more on what had changed since her arrival. The respect she had earned from her team was something she knew had to be maintained, and she wasn't about to let her guard down. Every action she took, every decision she made, had to be calculated. There was no room for mistakes. As she walked through the base, Lena could feel the weight of her leadership role more than ever. She had proven herself on the battlefield, but now she had to prove she could handle the responsibility that came with it. The whispers from the mess hall had faded, replaced by new eyes, new expectations. Some of her team members now sought her advice, came to her for guidance. It was a subtle shift, but it meant everything. It was one thing to be respected as a fighter, it was another to be trusted as a leader. One morning, Lena was called into the operations room, where Anderson was waiting for her. He looked up from the briefing table as she entered. "Lena," he said, his voice steady, "I need to talk to you about the next phase of operations. We've got a bigger target, and I think you're the one to lead the mission." Lena stood at attention, her mind already working through the possibilities. She knew this wasn't just another mission, this was a step up, a chance to show what she was truly capable of. "What's the target, sir?" she asked, her voice calm but focused. Anderson didn't hesitate. A high-ranking official is believed to be operating out of a heavily fortified compound in the mountains. We've been tracking him for weeks, and we finally have the intel we need. This is a critical mission. Lena nodded, her eyes narrowing with determination. "I'm ready, sir," she said, her voice steady. "Good," Anderson replied. "You'll have full control over the operation. Choose your team wisely. We're going to need everyone at their best." As Lena left the briefing room, she felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. This mission would be different. She wasn't just going in with her team, she was the one making the decisions, calling the shots. There would be no room for error. The next few days were a blur of preparation and planning. Lena spent every moment reviewing the mission details, coordinating with her team, and ensuring everyone was ready. She had learned the importance of preparation through her past experiences. The more prepared you were, the less room there was for the unexpected. When the day of the mission arrived, Lena felt a quiet confidence. She had led her team through challenging situations before, but this time, she was leading them into the heart of the enemy's territory. The helicopter ride to the target area was tense, the air thick with anticipation. As the team sat in silence, Lena couldn't help but think about how far she had come. She had started as an unknown recruit, underestimated by everyone around her. Now, she was the one in charge, the one they all looked to for direction. She had earned that trust, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. The helicopter touched down near the target compound, and Lena's team quickly disembarked. They moved with precision, just as they had trained. The terrain was rough, the mountains steep, but Lena's focus never wavered. They had a job to do, and nothing was going to stand in their way. As they reached the compound, Lena assessed the situation. The guards were heavily armed, and the compound was surrounded by high walls, but Lena wasn't intimidated. She had faced tougher challenges before. She looked at her team and gave a single, silent nod. It was time. The team moved quickly and quietly, infiltrating the compound through a weak point in the perimeter. Lena's heart raced as they neared the target's location, but her mind remained sharp, her decisions quick. This was what she had trained for. As they approached the room where the high-ranking official was believed to be, Lena's team took their positions, waiting for her signal. She looked at each of them, meeting their eyes with a steady gaze. They were ready. The room was silent as Lena gave the command to breach. The door was kicked in, and the team rushed in, guns raised. The official was caught off guard, but it didn't matter. The mission was a success, and Lena had led her team to victory once again. As they made their way back to the extraction point, Lena couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had earned the respect of her team, but more importantly, she had proven to herself that she could lead, that she could make the tough decisions, and that she could handle whatever came her way. The mission had been successful, but Lena knew that the journey was far from over. This was just one battle in a much larger war, and she was ready for whatever came next. As Lena stood at the edge of the operations room, watching her team celebrate their success, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It had been a successful mission, but there was no time for complacency. She had learned that the hard way. A sense of unease lingered, gnawing at her as she reflected on the bigger picture. The missions were getting more complex, the stakes higher, and the pressure more intense. As she glanced around, she noticed that some of the team members were congratulating each other, while others were just quietly processing the success in their own ways. Anderson, the commanding officer, approached her, his face calm but serious. "You did well, Lena," he said, his voice steady. "But I think you know this was just the beginning. Things are only going to get tougher from here." Lena nodded, her mind already shifting to the next phase of their operations. "I'm ready, sir," she replied, her voice firm. "I know this is just one mission in a much larger picture." Anderson gave her a long look, sizing her up. "Good," he said, before adding, "I'm assigning you to a new operation. I want you to lead this one. It's a different kind of mission. More intelligence-based, but just as dangerous. Are you up for it?" Lena didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir," she said. "I'm ready." The weight of his words hit her like a punch in the gut. This wasn't just about fighting, it was about outsmarting the enemy. It would require a different set of skills, a new level of strategy and patience. But Lena was no stranger to challenge. She had always pushed herself beyond what others thought was possible. The next mission would require her to navigate through a complex web of intelligence, identifying key targets, and infiltrating enemy networks. It wasn't the kind of mission she had led before, but it was exactly the kind of challenge she had been waiting for. The next few days were filled with planning and coordination. Lena and her team spent hours poring over intelligence reports, mapping out enemy movements, and gathering as much information as they could. The mission was critical, and Lena knew that one misstep could mean failure. The team's trust in her was evident, but the weight of leadership was heavier than ever. She couldn't afford to let them down. The operation was set to begin at nightfall. Lena and her team would have to infiltrate a high-security facility, extract vital information, and return without being detected. The risk was high, but the payoff would be worth it. As the team prepared, Lena took a moment to check her gear, ensuring everything was in place. This time, the mission wasn't about brute force, it was about finesse, precision, and timing. She had to outsmart the enemy, using everything at her disposal. The evening arrived, and the team gathered in the shadows outside the facility. The air was thick with anticipation. Lena surveyed the area, making mental notes of every guard, every entry point, and every possible obstacle. It was a delicate operation, and there could be no mistakes. "Stay sharp, stay quiet," she whispered to the team. "We do this by the book." They moved like shadows, silent and unseen, making their way through the compound's perimeter. The guards were spaced out, and the security systems were tight, but Lena had already anticipated the challenges. She guided her team through the facility with ease, bypassing security checkpoints and sneaking past the guards with a quiet efficiency that only came with experience. When they reached the target room, Lena gave the signal to breach. They moved quickly, incapacitating the guards inside without making a sound. The information they needed was on a secure server in the back of the room, but the challenge wasn't just getting to it, it was extracting the data without leaving any trace. Lena worked quickly, directing her team as they set up the extraction devices and began downloading the data. It was a delicate process, one that required absolute precision. Time was running out. Every second felt like an eternity. As the data finished downloading, Lena's heart raced. The mission was a success, but they weren't out of the woods yet. They had to get out, and they had to do it without alerting the facility's security to their presence. The team moved quickly, retracing their steps through the compound, taking care not to leave any evidence behind. As they reached the extraction point, Lena felt a brief moment of relief. But just as they were about to make their escape, an alarm sounded. The facility had detected a breach. "Go, go, go!" Lena shouted, her voice steady but urgent. They ran through the darkened hallways, the sound of footsteps echoing behind them. They had to move faster. They reached the exit just as the enemy reinforcements arrived, but they made it to the extraction point just in time. As the helicopter lifted off, Lena looked at her team. They were all exhausted, but they had done it. They had succeeded. The mission was a success, but Lena knew that this was only the beginning. There were still more missions ahead, more challenges to face. She had proven herself once again, but there was always more to learn, always more to achieve. And Lena was ready for whatever came next. As Lena stood at the edge of the helicopter pad, watching the dust settle after the successful extraction, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. The mission had been a success, but as she looked out over the horizon, she knew that there was still much more to be done. The adrenaline from the operation had worn off, but the responsibility of leadership still weighed heavily on her shoulders. She had proven herself time and again, but each mission felt like a new challenge, a new test. The success of the last operation was a victory, but Lena knew better than to dwell on it for too long. There was always another mission, another risk to take, and the path ahead was uncertain. Back at the base, the team gathered to debrief, each member still processing the success of the operation. Lena stood off to the side, allowing the others to talk. Sergeant Anderson, however, made his way over to her. "You did good, Lena," he said, his voice low, "but there's always more to prove. We've got another mission coming up, and it's not going to be easy." Lena met his gaze, her mind already shifting gears. She didn't need to ask what the next mission would be, she had a feeling it wouldn't be as simple as the last one. "I'm ready, sir," she said, her voice calm but determined. Anderson studied her for a moment before nodding. "I know you are. We'll meet tomorrow to discuss the details." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Lena alone with her thoughts. She had earned Anderson's respect, but she couldn't help but wonder if the next mission would be her true test. It wasn't just about fighting anymore, it was about leading, making the tough decisions when lives were on the line. And that was the weight she carried every time she took command. The next day, Lena met with Anderson and the rest of the team in the operations room. The mission was critical. They were tasked with infiltrating a fortified enemy base to recover sensitive intelligence, but the operation was risky. The base was deep in hostile territory, and getting in undetected would be nearly impossible. But this was the job they had signed up for. As Anderson outlined the mission, Lena listened intently, focusing on every detail. She knew that the key to this operation would be precision and timing. The team would have to move quickly, stay out of sight, and act fast once inside the base. There could be no hesitation. "Lena, I'm putting you in charge of this one," Anderson said, breaking her focus. "You've got the experience, and I trust you to make the right calls." Lena nodded, her mind already running through the plan. She had faced worse situations, but this one felt different. There was something about the stakes, the high-risk nature of the mission, that made her feel more determined than ever to prove herself. As the team prepared for the mission, Lena spent the evening double-checking the details, making sure every piece of equipment was accounted for. The slightest mistake could compromise the entire operation, and she wasn't about to let that happen. The next morning, they boarded the helicopter, their faces grim and focused. The air was thick with anticipation, but Lena remained calm, her eyes scanning the terrain below as the helicopter flew toward the target. They would land miles away from the base and make their way on foot, under cover of darkness. They had trained for this moment, and now it was time to execute. The helicopter touched down on a narrow ridge, far from enemy sight. The team quickly disembarked, and Lena took charge, leading them down the rocky terrain toward the base. The silence was deafening as they moved forward, every soldier alert to the slightest sound or movement. Lena's mind was sharp, calculating every move, every step. As they neared the base, the tension was palpable. They had to be careful, every move had to be precise. The guards were well trained, and the security was tight, but Lena had planned for every possibility. When they reached the outer perimeter, she signaled for the team to stop. They would enter through a narrow gap in the fence, just wide enough for them to slip through unnoticed. It would be risky, but it was their only option. "On my mark," Lena whispered. She could hear the distant voices of the guards, their patrol routes predictable, but they had no room for error. "Go," she said, and the team moved swiftly, making their way through the gap. Once inside, they spread out, moving in silence, staying out of sight. Lena led the way, using the shadows to their advantage as they made their way deeper into the base. The mission was simple: find the intel, extract it, and get out. But as always, the unexpected happened. Just as they reached the room containing the sensitive data, they were spotted by a guard. The alarm blared, and within seconds, the base was on high alert. "Move!" Lena shouted, her voice steady despite the chaos. The team reacted instantly, moving to secure the data while Lena kept watch. The seconds felt like hours as they downloaded the intel, but Lena remained focused. This was the moment she had been training for. As they made their escape, the enemy closing in on their position, Lena knew this was the true test of her leadership. The operation had been a success, but the journey was far from over. She had led her team into the heart of enemy territory and come out on top. The mission was complete, but Lena knew that the next challenge was just around the corner. As the helicopter flew back to base, Lena sat silently, watching the landscape below blur into the distance. The mission had been a success, but it had come at a cost. There had been moments when things almost went sideways, and the team had barely made it out undetected. Still, Lena had led them through it, just as she had done countless times before. But this mission was different. It had tested her leadership like never before. She had been forced to make quick decisions, to think on her feet, and to trust her instincts when things got tense. Her mind replayed the events in her head, analyzing every move, every call she made. There was no room for error, and she had made sure to steer her team through the chaos. As they touched down, Lena could see the familiar faces of her teammates, tired but relieved. Anderson was already waiting for them. He looked up as they disembarked and gave Lena a small nod of approval. "You did good, Lena," he said, his voice low. "The mission was a success. You handled it well." Lena simply nodded in response, feeling the weight of the words settle on her shoulders. She had done well, but she knew it wasn't over. Leadership was a never-ending test, and she wasn't about to stop now. "What's next, sir?" Lena asked, her voice steady. Anderson looked at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Rest for now," he said finally. "We've got another mission coming up, but we'll take the time to prepare. You've earned a break, but it won't last long." Lena nodded again, her mind already moving forward. There would be no time to relax, not with what was coming. As the team made their way back to the barracks, Lena's thoughts were a whirlwind. She had led her team through another successful mission, but now the real work would begin. The next mission would be even more dangerous, more complex. But Lena was ready. She had proven to herself and her team that she was more than just a soldier, she was a leader, capable of guiding them through the toughest of situations. That thought stayed with her as she entered her quarters. She had earned the respect of her team, but she knew it wasn't something that could be taken for granted. Respect had to be earned every day, with every decision, with every action. And Lena was determined to keep earning it. The days passed quickly as preparations for the next mission began. Lena's mind was focused, every step she took methodical and calculated. She went over the mission plan again and again, ensuring that nothing would be left to chance. As the time drew nearer, Lena felt a familiar calm settle over her. This was what she was made for. The helicopter ride to the target area was quiet, the team tense but ready. Lena could feel the energy in the air. This mission was different. It was the kind of mission that would define everything she had worked for. As they neared the drop zone, Lena's thoughts were clear. She had led her team through many operations, but this one would be the true test. She wasn't just leading soldiers, she was leading a team of highly skilled individuals, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. It was her job to bring them all together, to make sure they worked as one unit. They touched down near the objective site, and the team quickly moved into position. There was no time to waste. Lena took charge, leading them toward the target with precision and focus. The air was thick with anticipation, but Lena didn't let it get to her. She had trained for moments like this. She knew how to stay calm under pressure, how to make the right call when it mattered. The team moved quickly, each member knowing their role. They reached the compound without being detected, but the real challenge was still ahead. As they breached the target building, Lena's heart raced, but her mind was calm. This was the moment she had been preparing for. The room was filled with enemy forces, but Lena had no doubt that her team would handle it. She watched as they moved through the building, neutralizing the threat with skill and efficiency. Everything was going according to plan, but there was still danger. The target was close now, and they had to be quick. They reached the room, and Lena gave the signal to secure the area. The mission was nearly complete. As they extracted the target, Lena felt a sense of satisfaction. The mission had been a success, and once again, she had proven her ability to lead. As the team made their way back to the extraction point, Lena couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of pride. She had led her team to victory once more, but she knew that the journey wasn't over. There would always be another mission, another test. But for now, she had done what needed to be done. And as long as she had her team, she knew they would continue to succeed. Lena's journey was far from over, and she was ready for whatever came next.